Hi everyone, my name's Diabidor, and today I'm going to show you how to make the best Dragon Communion Seal build in Elden Ring. This build will be an Arcane Faith hybrid, and I'll explain everything about it so you can understand why this build is so strong. First, I'll give you an overview and explanation of the build, including everything from its stats to its weapons, armor, spells, and talismans. Then I'll show you where to get the most important items for the build. And finally, I'll show off just how strong this build is and give you some pointers for using it. If you find this guide helpful, please consider leaving a like, sharing, and subscribing. It really helps me out. First, let's look at the stats. This build is optimized for level 125 with plus 25 weapons. This is really a matter of personal preference. I like to stop here because I just feel like it's a good place to finish a build. And of course, it's also the PvP meta level, where you can find the most activity for invasions and duels. Stopping at a specific level only matters if you want to play multiplayer at that level, and you can level it up higher if you want. As we go along, I'll give you some tips about what to level as we go higher, but I'll be using it at 125 for this video. Our first stat is Vigor, and this is at 40. Do not skimp out on the Vigor. Every single build needs at least 40 Vigor. Having 40 Vigor makes sure that you can actually survive in fights. You'll see me take a bunch of hits from some pretty strong enemies and survive because of this, and I'm on New Game Plus 2, so the enemies are hitting much harder. If you go past level 125, this is the first thing you should level it up. Get it up to 60 before you put points into anything else. Don't go past 60 though, because that's the soft cap, and it's very wasteful to go past 60 Vigor. Up next is Mind. I like to go to 20 for this. 20 Mind is just a generally good amount to have. It lets you use your skills and spells pretty generously, and also lets you summon most Spirit Ashes if you want. Some of our spells, specifically the Dragon Breath ones, do use a lot of FP, so you may want to consider leveling Mind to 25 or 30, but I think this build is going to kill stuff so fast that it doesn't really matter. If anything, just take an extra blue flask or two. My recommendation for this build is 8 red, 6 blue. Also at 20 is Endurance. 20 Endurance is good enough for like 95% of builds, seriously. Unless you're using colossal weapons, you really don't need more than this, and here's why. Armor is not important in this game. The main reason you'd level Endurance is so you can use heavier gear, and if your weapons are heavy, then it's a fine investment. But heavy armor is extremely inefficient when it comes to the weight to protection ratio. I'll write about this down in the description because I'm trying to keep this video relatively short, but basically, any points you'd put into Endurance for heavier armor than what you can wear at 20 Endurance are better spent in Vigor or your damage stats. Like, you can put 40 points into Endurance and get about 14% more damage negation, or you can put 20 points into Vigor to bring it from 40 to 60 and get over 30% more health. So it's literally more than twice as efficient to level Vigor instead of Endurance. With that all said, I'm not saying you shouldn't wear armor at all. I'm just saying that it's not worth leveling up Endurance so you can wear those super heavy sets like Radons or the Bull Goats. That's fine if you want to wear that kind of armor because you like the look of it, but it's not worth it for the little bit of extra protection it gives you. Now let's move on to the damage stats. First off, we've got 15 strength and 14 dex. This is primarily an arcane build, so we're going to be using weapons with arcane scaling. Thus, we only need the minimum required strength and dex to wield our weapons. If you want to use something that requires more, or stuff that requires less, then adjust these as needed, but don't level them up for damage because they're not going to impact your damage at all. Also, you'll see that we require 18 dex, but I only have 14. But we're using Milicent's Prosthesis to make up for that because it gives plus 5 dex. Our highest dex requirement is Rivers of Blood at 18 dex. I went with 14 base dex because our second highest requirement is my Precious Flamberge at 14 dex. You can adjust it as needed based on the weapons you want to use. We've got no intelligence because it's not useful for this build. I'm mentioning it because you totally can cast sorceries with this build if you want. You just need to get the minimum intelligence required to cast them. You'd want to use the Albinaric Staff because it gets arcane scaling, so that'll let you do the most damage with our high arcane stat. But yeah, Even with just 10 to 15 extra points, you can cast some pretty strong sorceries if you so desire. I wouldn't recommend it because it's not very stat efficient, but the option is there if you've got extra points to spare. Finally, we're at the meat and potatoes of the build. We've got 50 Arcane and 35 Faith. The Arcane should be obvious. The Dragon Communion Seal gets an S in Arcane scaling, so you want as much Arcane as possible when you're using it, right? Only, wait! We have more Faith than is required. Diabetor, you might ask. Why do you have 9 more points into Faith than is necessary? Shouldn't you just put those into Arcane? That's a good question. You would think that makes sense, because again, S scaling for Arcane, but you would be wrong. It turns out that the scaling letters in Elden Ring often lie. Yay! Without getting overly technical, we can look at this graph to understand why it's better to have an even split for Faith in Arcane when using the seal, up to a certain point, and I'll explain why we don't actually have an even split in a minute. There will be a link to the Reddit post with this graph and more down in the description. Essentially, this is a chart of the amount of extra incant scaling you get for each point you invest in your Arcane and Faith stats. Due to some From Software fuckery, the Dragon Communion Seal uses this Hybrid Catalyst scaling curve. The quirk about the Hybrid Catalyst scaling curve is that it means both the Arcane and Faith scaling of this seal are actually equal. You can see that up to 45 Arcane or Faith, there's a significant spell power increase per each point spent. 45 is the soft cap, so after that, each point is worth much less. So you'd get to 45 Arcane, and then it actually becomes more efficient to level up Faith instead, because now each Faith point is worth more than any further Arcane points, up until 45 Faith. After that, you have a choice: level up Arcane, or level Faith, or level both. The reason why we keep leveling Arcane is because that's literally the only reason to use the Dragon Communion Seal. If you're gonna go past 45 Faith, then you'll get to a point where you get better damage from the Erdtree Seal instead, because it gets better Faith scaling, and that happens specifically around 60 Faith. So then it's just not really a Dragon Communion Seal build anymore, right? So after 45 Arcane and Faith, this build just wants more Arcane, because that's what makes it an Arcane build. So why do we have 35 Faith and 50 Arcane instead of 45 and 45? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The first is for fashion. I think this outfit looks pretty cool, and the Mask of Confidence provides +3 Arcane, so we can afford to be a little inefficient because that makes up for it. With the effective 53 Arcane and 35 Faith, we're losing a single point of incant scaling compared to having an even split, so whatever. Also, since we're using Arcane scaling weapons, specifically with the Occult affinity, those want as much Arcane as possible, so I figured it's better to lose out just a bit of spell damage in order to gain a bunch of weapon damage. This build can probably be optimized more for this level, like you can get 3 extra stat points if you start as Prophet instead of choosing Wretch like I did, but overall I think this is pretty much as good as it's going to get for the playstyle I personally enjoy, which you'll see in this showcase. If you decide to go past level 125, then after you get 60 Vigor, you have a couple options. If you bring Faith up to 45, then you'll see a significant increase in your spell damage, and then after that you should just put every point into Arcane. Or, you can just forget about Faith and leave it at 35, and just go whole hog on Arcane if you want to maximize your weapon damage. Personally, I'd probably do the Faith then Arcane way, but again, it's mostly a matter of what you find fun. Really, as long as you have high Vigor and upgrade your weapons, you'll at least be okay. That's just about everything I have to say about the stats, so now let's move on to our equipment. Now let's talk about weapons and armor. I'll preface by saying that I optimized the loadout based on having 20 endurance and wearing the Knight's set. You'll see that you can wear the 4 heaviest talismans in the game, plus the Knight's set, plus any weapon that weighs 10 and an offhand Reduvia, and be just short of heavy load. If you want to wear different armor, or if you want to use lighter weapons, then you can switch things up as needed, but that's the framework I like to work under. For our weapons, the main one is obviously the Dragon Communion Seal. It has the benefit of being weightless, so we don't have to worry about it when it comes to equip load. Also, Having it in your hand provides a buff to any Dragon Communion spell you cast, so it's best to have 2 of them. Unfortunately, that requires either going into New Game Plus or having someone drop a second one for you. So if you can't get a second one, then I'd recommend using the Jellyfish shield in your offhand. You'll have to two-hand it to be able to wield it, because we don't meet its 20 strength requirement, but you can two-hand it, use the buff for its 20% bonus to all damage you do, and then switch to one-handing it and use the seal in your right hand to cast your spells. This is actually better for your damage output than having 2 Dragon Communion seals, because the Dragon Communion seal only provides a 15% damage buff, and only to Dragon Communion spells. But I prefer going dual seals because it weighs much less, and I also just kinda hate the way the shield looks. The other weapon I recommend specifically using for this build is the Reduvia. It's light, it's fast, it does good damage with our Arcane stat, and it gets great bleed buildup. When you use its Ash of War, Reduvia Bloodblade, you can melt anything that isn't immune to bleed. I like using it as an offhand weapon because it lets you do quick follow-up attacks and gives you a fast option if your main weapon is something slow, like a hammer or greatsword. Offhand daggers are also great for PvP, but this isn't a PvP build guide, so I'm not going to talk too much about that right now. Other than that, when it comes to selecting weapons, it's really up to your preferences. Since we're an Arcane build, we get access to the Occult affinity, so any weapon that has innate bleed buildup will excel with this build. My preferences include the Morningstar, the Scythe or Grave Scythe, the Vulgar Militia Saw, the Uchi-Katana or Nagakiba, and of course, my beloved Flamberge. I put a selection of weapons into this build's inventory, but any weapon with innate bleed will be great with this build as long as you choose the Occult affinity. We are not using the Blood affinity though, because that wants a lot of strength or dexterity depending on the weapon. With Occult, you'll get less bleed buildup, but you'll do way more damage overall with these stats. There are also weapons like Rivers of Blood and the Ripple Blade. Rivers is a solid arcane weapon, and its Ash of War, Corpse Piler, can actually do some pretty insane DPS if you use it correctly, which I'll talk about in the showcase. The Ripple Blade, and its brother the Ripple Crescent Halberd, gets pure arcane scaling for its damage, so it'll do great damage with our high arc. It doesn't do any status buildup, but it has the pretty unique property of being buffable with spells and greases. It turns out that if you put blood, poison, or sleep grease on it, then that grease will also scale with your arcane stat. This only works on the Ripple Halberd and Blade, and Vari's Bouquet, but that's a garbage weapon. Greases don't scale with your stats on any other weapon besides the Ripple weapons. But yeah, the Ripple weapons can do some really good damage with high arcane, and being buffable makes them versatile. So if you have those 3 greases, then you can switch between them as needed, which I think is just a pretty cool gimmick to have. I also want to draw attention to the Flame Art Misery Cord that you see in the inventory. For some unknown reason, when you do a crit, like a backstab or a riposte, with a weapon that has physical and elemental damage, you'll often do way more damage than just using physical damage, such as if we had the Occult affinity. This split damage is generally less optimal than using a single damage type, but for crits specifically, it's way better for some reason. So instead of making the Misery Cord Occult like you'd expect, I went with Flame Art instead, because that fire damage will make your crits way stronger. And of course, we chose Flame Art specifically because it scales with Faith, and so that's the best for our stats, because we have high Faith in addition to the high Arcane. Though Sacred is also an option. I just like Flame Art because I feel like the fire damage generally synergizes better with our spells, because we might use things like the Flame Shroud and Cracktear, for example, to buff the Dragonfire spell. For our talismans, I put a bunch in the inventory so that we could swap them around as needed. People usually equip their talismans in order of least important to most important, so the one in the left is the one you can swap out a lot as needed, and the one on the right is one you should probably keep equipped for pretty much any circumstance. The default loadout for this build is Ritual Sword Talisman, which increases all damage you do when you're at max health, Shard of Alexander, which increases your Ash of War damage, Lord of Blood's Exultation, which gives you a damage buff after you proc a bleed on an enemy, and Milicent's Prosthesis, which gives +5 dexterity and gives an increasing damage buff as you get more hits in a short period of time. Ritual Sword is a universally good talisman, but it requires you to stay at full health for its benefit, so in case you have trouble doing that, which is understandable, then you can get something like the Ritual Shield Talisman, which instead increases your damage negation when you're at full health, and that'll help you survive longer in fights, because the first hit you take will do way less damage. Shard of Alexander is great because it increases your Ash of War damage by 15%. However, you can't get it until near the end of the game, so unless you trade for it, your only good option is to just not use it. So I put a bunch of alternatives in the inventory. You can use something like the Radagon icon, which will increase your spellcasting speed. You can use the Phlox or Faithful's Canvas talismans to increase your incantation damage. There's a bunch of different options, and you can try them out and swap them out as needed. Lord of Blood's Exultation is a pretty obvious choice for any arcane build. You do a lot of bleed buildup with your weapons, so when you proc the bleed, you get a big damage boost, and that happens for all damage that you do. So something that's a great strategy is you can proc a bleed on an enemy to get the Lord of Blood's Exultation buff, and then you can use your spells, like Dragonclaw or whatever, to do a fuckload of damage because you have that buff from Lord of Blood's Exultation. If you don't have it, or you don't want to use it for whatever reason, again, you've got options like the Radagon icon and the Phlox Canvas talisman that you can swap it out to, but this is one that I definitely recommend keeping on the build. Milicent's Prosthesis is just a good all-around talisman. Not only does it save us a few points so that we can use Rivers of Blood with the stats I chose, but the consecutive hit buff is really, really strong, especially if you stack it with something like Rotten Winged Sword Insignia and the Thorny Cracktear in your Physic. You'll see me use that kind of loadout when I use the Scavenger's Curve Swords in the showcase, and it does some insane damage. You could swap this to something like Dragoncrest Great Shield, or anything you want really, because it's not really a necessary part of the build, but I put this in the 4th talisman slot because I think it's worth having on at pretty much all times. For our armor, like I said, I optimized the build's equip load around having the Knight set equipped. If you don't know what you want to wear, or if you don't care about fashion, or if you want just some pretty good and efficient armor, the Knight set is always a good choice. It has 51 poise, which is the only breakpoint that really matters in PvE, so if you're concerned about poise, then that'll be helpful. It also offers decent protection and doesn't weigh an ungodly amount, so it's compatible with most builds without having too much stat investment into endurance. Like I said earlier, armor isn't as important as you think it is, so you seriously should not level up endurance for the sake of wearing more armor. If the Knight set isn't your cup of tea, then you can use pretty much anything you want as long as you stay in medium load. I chose an outfit I think looks pretty cool, being the Mask of Confidence, Altered Nox Monk armor, Briar Gauntlets, and Nox Greaves. The armor just looks cool, but the Mask of Confidence increases your arcane by 3, which isn't much, but it helps. The most optimal helm to wear would definitely be the White Mask, which is like the Lord of Blood's Exultation because it gives you a damage buff after you proc a bleed. I included it in the inventory because, like I said, it's probably the best in slot helm for this build, but personally I didn't use it because I hate the way it looks. But you know, if you want to maximize your damage, then that's definitely what you should be using. I also want to point out that I like to wear the Briar Gauntlets because they make it easier to stance break enemies. See, when you're wearing any pieces of the Briar set, your rolls will do damage to enemies. The damage from the pieces of the set stack, so wearing the full set will do the most roll damage, but even having just the gauntlets on will do 1 point of damage. And more importantly, it'll do like 1/10 of a point of stance damage. It's too little to ever actually get an actual stance break with, but it will prevent an enemy's poise from regenerating. So if you have to dodge an enemy's attacks and you roll into them, then it'll keep resetting their poise regen timer, thus making it easier to get stance breaks. I always include the gauntlets in my outfits because they're the lightest part of the Briar set, but they are optional, so you can switch them to anything else if you don't like them. Now we're going to briefly go over the spells. I'm going to talk about these a lot more during the showcase, so I don't want to go too into depth with them here. So the main 3 spells that we're using in this build are Dragon Claw, Dragon Ice, and Rotten Breath. They're all Dragon Communion spells, and you can use any Dragon Communion spells you want. So for example, you see I also have Dragon Fire equipped. all the Dragon Communion spells are going to be buffed by the Dragon Communion seal, so it obviously makes sense to have those spells whenever you're using a build that revolves around this seal. I chose these 3 spells specifically, and again that's Ice, Claw, and Breath, because they're, in my opinion, the strongest ones. Dragon Claw is just a super strong melee range option that does an obscene amount of damage, it does a good amount of poise damage, it gives you hyper armor, so it lets you trade through enemies' attacks, and especially if you have the Knight set on, you're pretty much completely uninterruptible once you get to a certain point in the Dragon Claw animation. Then there's also Dragon Ice, so it does magic damage, which is a little suboptimal for this build, but what's important is that it does Frostbite buildup. And when you proc Frostbite on an enemy, not only does that take off a big chunk of their health, but it also makes them take 20% more damage from everything for 30 seconds. So you're going to see in the showcase, I open up most boss fights with Dragon Ice to hit them with Frostbite, and then I hit them with the other spells so that I'm doing even more damage on top of all the buffs and stuff that we have. And then finally, Rotten Breath. Not only does it do standard damage, which is actually really useful, like unlike Dragonfire, for example, which obviously does fire damage, Rotten Breath does standard physical damage, and so that can be useful against enemies that are resistant to elements. You'll see I use it in one of the showcase clips. But Rotten Breath also does Scarlet Rot buildup, and it does the strong version of Scarlet Rot, so there's actually multiple versions of Scarlet Rot in the game. Something that you get from, say, the Antspur Rapier, doesn't do as much damage as the rot that you do with Rotten Breath. So that makes it especially strong, and of course, Scarlet Rot in general is just super strong because it's a damage over time effect that takes off a lot of the enemy's health. And since it's actually done as a percentage of the enemy's max health, so the damage over time it does, it's like a complicated formula, but the damage over time that it does is based on a percentage of the enemy's maximum health. That means that the more health the enemy has, the more damage it'll do. And so that's really good against bosses and stuff too. The other important spells here are Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. Both of these are buff spells, so Golden Vow will increase your damage by, I want to say it's like 12%, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but Golden Vow increases all damage that you do by a significant amount, and it also increases all of your damage negation, which makes you just a bit tankier. Flame Grant Me Strength increases your physical damage and fire damage, so it doesn't work on things like magic or lightning, for example, but it does buff physical and fire damage with all the attacks that you do. And so these two combined give us obviously a very significant damage buff in addition to the talismans and the buffs from things like Lord of Blood's Exultation, for example, and that means that we're going to do an obscene amount of damage with all of our spells. Now the thing that's beautiful about this build is that since we have 45 Faith, you can use pretty much any incantation in the game. So you'll see in the build I have things like Bloodflame Talons, Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, and Frenzied Burst equipped. So you could equip pretty much any incantation you want, and as long as you're using the Dragon Communion seal to cast it, which is what gives us the best incant scaling because of our high Arcane and high Faith, which is what that thing scales with, as long as you use that, any incantation will do a lot of damage. So you have an extremely versatile build outside of using just the Dragon Communion spells, and you'll see I use a couple of them in the showcase. And then finally, I want to give a quick mention to the crystal tiers that we have equipped. So I have the Opaline Hardtear, so that's not the Opaline Bubble tier, it's the Opaline Hardtear. The Bubble tier only lasts for one hit, so it's kind of worthless if you ask me. But the Hardtear gives you 15% damage negation to all damage types for 3 minutes, and so that makes you a lot tankier, especially when you combine it with something like Golden Vow and decent armor like the Knight set. And then the other crystal tier I have equipped is the Faith Not crystal tier. That increases your Faith by 10 for 3 minutes. And so with our 35 base Faith, that brings us up to the 45 breakpoint for the Dragon Communion seal, thus maximizing the damage that we can do with the seal. If you want to focus on a specific damage type, such as fire or magic, if you're using like, you know, Dragon Fire or Dragon Ice, or even like Smaragd's Grinstone Breath or whatever, if you want to use a specific damage type, then you can swap out that Faith tier to something like the Flame Shrouding Crack tier or the Magic Shrouding tier, and that'll give you a bigger buff to your damage. But using the Faith tier will buff all damage you do with the seal by a little bit, and I think that's good to do. You can also throw some consumables in, such as Boiled Crab if you want more physical negation, or Uplifting Aromatics if you want that bubble shield that it gives you without wasting a slot in your Wondrous Physic. Those are good, just be careful of making sure that you're using buffs that can actually stack together. So for example, Golden Vow can stack with just about anything, because it's an aura buff. I don't think that there's any consumables that give you an aura buff, for example. But Flame Grant Me Strength is a body buff, and something like Boiled Crab is also a body buff. So those two spells can't stack. So you can have Golden Vow and either Flame Grant Me Strength or Boiled Crab, for example. So there's things like that. There's Exalted Flesh if you want to go harder on your physical damage, or also Blood Boil Aromatics, which increase only physical damage, but by a higher amount than Flame Grant Me Strength does. You've also got consumable weapons, such as Fan Daggers, which is something I always recommend having on every build. Those are, not only are they good for, doing damage to, like, small enemies at a minor distance, but they're also good at keeping up stance damage, because when you hit an enemy with it, it does, like, half a point of poise damage per fan dagger that actually hits. So the fan daggers throw out 5 daggers for a total of 2.5 poise damage. But even if only one hits the enemy, that'll prevent their poise from regenerating, and that makes it a lot easier to get stance breaks. So I always recommend having fan daggers. You could also get something like Poison Bone Darts, which are especially good with this build because we have high Arcane, and the poison buildup they do scales with Arcane. So you can have throwing daggers that not only prevent an enemy's poise from regenerating, but also cause poison buildup on that enemy, and so that's an extra damage type that you're doing for damage over time, so that's always good to have. And finally, if you decide to use the Ripple Blade or the Ripple Halberd, I strongly recommend you stock up on Blood, Poison, and Sleep Greases. These 3 greases scale with your Arcane when you put them on the Ripple Blade or the Ripple Halberd. It doesn't work for any other greases like Freezing or Rock Grease. It's just Blood, Poison, and Sleep Grease. But yeah, so if you're using those weapons, which are pretty strong, the Ripple Blade in particular is one that I like because it has Wild Strikes on it. If you use those weapons, then adding greases to it just adds, free effects, and you can swap between them as needed, which you're going to see me do against the Godskins in the Spirit Caller Cave in this video. That concludes the build guide segment of this video. Now I'll show you where to get all of the most important items for this build. The first item we're going to grab is, of course, the Dragon Communion Seal, which you can find in the Fringefolk Hero's Grave in Limgrave. You'll probably recognize this place because it's where you start the game. So this is where you start the game. You grab that Stranded Graveyard State of Grace, of course, and there's the Stone Sword Key door that requires 2 Stone Sword Keys to enter. So this is a Hero's Grave. The Hero's Graves have these chariots, that's what makes them Hero's Graves. And so the way you avoid these is you run into these little nooks on the side. Also, you saw how I stopped there. I waited for the chariot to go back up the hill before I dropped down, because the chariot chases after you as you move through the dungeon, and it has to come all the way up that hill and then all the way back down, which gives you extra time to run, which is why it didn't catch up to me. But anyway, so you run down to the lowest part, make a right, and come up into this room, kill that Banished Knight, and he drops the Dragon Communion Seal. It doesn't instantly go into your inventory when you kill him, so make sure you actually pick it up off the floor, but there you go. To complement the seal, because you can only get 1 per playthrough unless you go trade for it from another player, we're going to go and grab the Jellyfish Shield in Western Liurnia. So you can see, from Ray of Lucaria, you head to the west coast, and just north of this Foot of the Four Belfries Site of Grace, you'll find a group of jellyfish over here. Murk them using your Dragon Breath if you so choose. These ones start off as hostile, so they will attack you when you get close, unlike most other jellyfish. But anyway, so kill them if you want, and on the ground you will find the Jellyfish Shield. This thing requires 20 strength to wield, and so with our stats, because we only have like 15 strength, we can't actually use the Ash of War. So you'll have to two-hand it, which gives you enough effective strength to use the Ash of War, and then use the Ash of War, and when the shield turns red, that means it's active, and then after that you can go back to one-handing and use your weapons as you desire. Up next is the other important part of this build, so obviously, in order to complement our Dragon Communion seal, we're going to need some Dragon Communion spells, so we're going to the Cathedral of Dragon Communion in southwest Caelid. You can get here by following the road north through Limgrave, and then go east, and it takes you straight down through Caelid over to the Cathedral. So I'm at the Caelid Highway South side of Grace, because I want to show this. So you can see the Cathedral on the hill back there, but in the way of it, there's this dragon, Exultation, and so, you know, they clearly want you to fight Exultation to be able to get to the church, or to the cathedral, but you don't have to fight him if you don't want to. You can just run past him, so keep that in mind. Also, there is a banished knight inside the cathedral, so you saw when I ran through the door, he like pulled out his sword, so be careful of him. But yeah, so there's a Scythe of Grace in here, and then you can come over to this altar, and you can perform Dragon Communion, where you can buy all of the Dragon Communion spells. So there's a bunch that start off available by default, and then when you kill certain dragons, you get more spells available. But the 3 that we want for this build, or at least the 3 that I like, are already unlocked by default, and you just need Dragon Hearts to be able to get them. So in order to make that easy, we're going to go and kill a dragon that drops 5 Dragon Hearts. So head over to the Third Church of Marika in northeast Limgrave, and in the pond just north of it, there's a teleporter that'll take you to the Bestial Sanctum in the Dragon Barrow. The door is unlocked, but it'll be closed, so if you look at that door there where the Scythe of Grace is, you have to go and open the door, but you can just open it by default. But anyway, so here we are all the way in the north part of Caelid, and we're going to follow the road south toward the Minor Erd Tree nearby. Once you get to the Minor Erd Tree, go around behind it, and there's a spirit spring that lets you jump up the cliff toward Fort Faroth. There's a Scythe of Grace outside of the fort, so make sure you grab it. And then just next to it, there is the giant dragon Grail. So you're going to want a bleed weapon of some kind. In my case, I'm using the Reduvia, which I'll show how to get later on in this guide. But as you can see, she has a fuckload of health, but if you hit her with bleed, then it takes off a big chunk of her health, so you only need to make her bleed like 7 or 8 times, and then she dies. So it should only take like 2 or 3 minutes, and then once she dies, not only do you get a bunch of runes, but you'll also get 5 Dragon Hearts. And you also unlock Grail's Roar, which is a Dragon Communion spell that you can now buy at the church, or at the Cathedral of Dragon Communion. But yeah, so of course we're going to use those 5 hearts we got to get at least Rotten Breath, Dragon Ice, and Dragon Claw, because those are, in my opinion, the best ones, and there's Grail's Roar if you want it. While we're grabbing spells, we're also going to head over to Fort Gale in western Caelid, where we're going to grab the Flame Grant Me Strength spell. So, once you first enter Caelid from the road through Limgrave, you'll come to the Rotview Balcony, and if instead of following the road through Caelid, you just go straight south, you have to jump over some rocks, but they're easy to get over. It's like, you know, Torrent can jump over it. Up there is where the Rotview Balcony is. So you just go south from the balcony, jump up the rocks, and then come down this hill, and that takes you to Fort Gale. We don't actually need to go inside the fort, we're instead going to go around behind it, so go past the gate, which is closed anyway. But yeah, go around the gate, come around the cliffside, kill that dude, and in between these 2 flame chariots is the Flame Grant Me Strength spell. Be careful not to get stun locked by those chariots, by the way. And for the last important spell of this build, we're going to go to the Bridge of Iniquity in Mount Gelmir, and we're going to grab the Golden Vow Incantation. So you can get here by going through Altus. You'll see there's this road that leads through it. So if you go into Altus and you follow the road north over here to the forest-spanning Great Bridge, there's a teleporter on the broken bridge that takes you to the other end of it here, and then from here you can just go around the road and then follow it to the west, and that will take you into Mount Gelmir. And so from the Bridge of Iniquity, Scythe of Grace, we're just going to follow the road up towards the Corpse Tent Shack. So I just want to turn around real quick and show you where we're at in case you need some kind of orientation. So, you know, there's the drawbridge that goes over the fucking Altus ravine that leads up to the Shade Castle. Anyway, so on this road, you're going to run past a bunch of Abductor Virgins. There's some soldiers, there's some dogs, there's Golden Vow inside the shack. And also, once you get to the shack, you'll be invaded by Anastasia, Tarnished Eater. So it's a pretty hostile area. Killing her is optional. She drops the butchering knife. But yeah, so be careful when you come through this area, but that's where you get the Golden Vow spell. Now we're going to grab a few weapons. So the first one we're going for is the Reduvia in the Limgrave Ravine. So from the Gatefront Ruins, if you head to the south towards the lake, you can come down into the ravine by heading north. So that's where we're going to go. So here's the route down into the ravine, go under the bridge, past the skeletons. Once you get to this area by Murkwater Cave, you'll be invaded by Bloody Finger Nereus. If you already have some spells or something like that, as you can see, Rotten Breath does the job pretty well. So he should be pretty easy to kill, and once he dies, he will drop the Reduvia, and it will immediately go into your inventory. So that's how you get Reduvia. Very good weapon. Strongly recommend using it. Up next, we're going to get the weapon that you saw in the thumbnail, which is the Morning Star. So to get this, we need to go down into the Weeping Peninsula, so just follow the road through Limgrave to the south, go across the Bridge of Sacrifice, and right past the ruin in this canyon thing here, where there's a bunch of misbegotten and destroyed carriage, that's where we will find the Morning Star. So we're going to run past Irina here, takes you right over to the carriage, and in the back of it, you can just grab the Morning Star. To add a bit of variety to the weapons, we're going to head over to the Cliff Bottom Catacombs in southeastern Liurnia, where we're going to grab the Scythe. So you can see here, it's on the highway. If you go to Laskyard Ruins, then you can just head directly to the east. That'll take you to the Purified Ruins, which is this right here. And then just next to that on the road, there is a Site of Grace. And if you head northeast from that, you'll see a statue that points you towards the Catacombs. And it's like hidden down on the bottom of this cliff, hence the name Cliff Bottom Catacombs. But yeah, so that's how we're going to get to it. So if you look to the northeast, you'll see that statue over there. If you walk up to it and interact with it, it'll like shoot a laser out and point you towards the Catacombs, but it's not hard to find. So come down this hill and just hug the right wall, and you'll go around and come up to the door. And there's your Cliff Bottom Catacombs. We don't need to kill anything here to get the Scythe, so as you're going to see, I'm just going to run past everything. It's a pretty straightforward path, so all you got to do is just keep going forward, and you will come to it. Should only take about a minute or two if you run past everything, obviously, as you can see here. Be careful because there's some traps along the way, and obviously a bunch of ambushes and imps and shit. But on this corpse here, there is your Scythe. So now we're going to grab a couple talismans. The first one we're going to grab is the Ritual Sword Talisman, which you can get from the Lux Ruins in the Altus Plateau. So from the Ground Lift of Dectus, if you head directly north up the hill, that'll just take you straight to the Lux Ruins. People also like to do like a parkour to get up to the ruins from the Erdtree Gazing Hill Site of Grace, but I prefer to just come from Altus Plateau. So come to the ruins, find the cellar, go down into it. There is an extremely difficult boss here, so you're going to have to ask her very nicely to let you see the talisman. And with a little bit of persuasion, she should be kind enough to let you check it out. So go into the door behind her, and inside the chest is the Ritual Sword Talisman. So now we're going to get the thing that's the most convoluted and difficult part of this entire build, and that is the Lord of Blood's Exultation. It's located in the sewers beneath Leyndell. As you can see, we're going to access them via the Avenue Balcony Site of Grace. So if you're looking at your map, you can find that alleyway there with these, I think they're like mausoleums or whatever. It's right underneath the giant dragon's wing. You can't miss it. So from the Avenue Balcony, go down the steps, and then find the well on the side, and we're going to jump down into that shit, and that takes us into the sewers. Once you head down into the shunning grounds, the first thing on your left is going to be the Site of Grace, called the Underground Roadside, so make sure you grab that. And so from the roadside, we're going to go out the door, we're going to face to the northeast, and we're going to go down this ladder in this alcove nook thing, you want to call this, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, so drop down this, and then we're going to head across the pipes towards the southwest, and we need to drop down to the very bottom part of this room. Be careful of all the imps that are throwing shit at you, but there's this giant pipe here. The route that I take here involves taking some fall damage. I'm pretty confident there's a way to get down here without taking any fall damage, but I don't know it, and I mean, it's really just, in my opinion, not significant enough to care. You know, if you drop from that pipe like I did, then you won't die. But anyway, so after that, you gotta run past the lobster that's gonna ambush you. Fuck you, lobster. I hit him with the raw breath when he couldn't get to me. And then right on your side, we can go down into the catacombs here. These are called the Leyndell Catacombs. So I'm gonna skip this because these catacombs are a little, like, mind-fucky. They trick you. I actually really like this catacombs a lot. But we need to kill the boss here, so we need to go through the catacombs and open the door. I will say, though, that if you're using rainbow stones, then you can mark your path by tossing down rainbow stones. So I like to put them on the right side of hallways and stuff, and that way I'll know where I've been, and I can follow them on my left in order to get back out. But yeah, so once you get to the second flame pillar, you'll know what I mean once you get here. Once you get to the second flame pillar, you can ride up this thing, and that will take you up to this semi-secret room. And then on your right, there is a staircase that takes you past a couple imps. So kill them if you so choose. And then at the end of this pathway is the lever that will open up the boss room door, and we can head straight back to the boss room. Hey, there's my rainbow stone. So this boss is Esger, Priest of Blood, and he's got 2 blood dogs with him. You're going to see here I do pretty well against him using Rot Breath, because it's going to murk the dogs once they come at me. But I also took like 7 or 8 tries to do it. So, you know, even using this Rot Breath and shit, because this boss is just so obnoxious. It's the dogs that are the problem. So link down in the description, I'll have a link to a Gino Machino short where he uses a great bow to cheese the dogs, or to cheese his entire boss, in fact. So I didn't do it here in the video, but there will be an alternative way of cheesing these fuckers, because I hate this boss. He sucks. Fuck you, Esger. But anyway, when you kill him, he will drop the Lord of Blood's Exultation. Alright, I'm going to give, hopefully, a relatively brief overview of Milicent's questline, so you can get Milicent's Prosthesis. This involves killing her, in case you want to know, if you want to keep her alive or something, so keep that in mind. But anyway, so you gotta kill Commander O'Neill in the heart of Aeonia, in the middle of Caelid, and he will drop the broken, unalloyed gold needle. Then you take the needle over to Gowrie, just south of Celia, Town of Sorcery, and you give it to him. He'll ask you to come back later, so quit out and reload the area. When you talk to him, he will give you back the repaired needle. Then you go up the cliff to the Church of the Plague, talk to Milicent and give her the needle, reload, and now she'll be standing up and she'll give you the +5 Dex Talisman, but that's not what we're here for. Then reload the area again, go back down to Gowrie's shack and talk to her there. Then head up to the Erdtree Gazing Hill in the Altus Plateau. And if you look to the north from the Grace, she's not next to the Grace. By the way, that was the Lux ruins we were looking at. She's not next to the Grace, she's north of it. A lot of people think, oh my god, where's Milicent? I can't find her. This is where she's at. She's not right next to the Grace. So, you don't need to talk to her there, but you are going to need to get the Valkyrie's Prosthesis from the Shaded Castle just to the north of where we're at. So you can follow the canyon up to the Shaded Castle. On the northwest side of it, there's this Clean Rot Knight guarding a chest, and inside the chest is the Valkyrie's Prosthesis. So grab that, bring it back to Milicent at the Erdtree Gazing Hill, give it to her. She'll say, thanks, cool, I can help you out now. Then you're going to need to go to North Altus to the Windmill Village, and there's the Godskin Apostle that you need to kill here. In this clip, he's already dead. The top set of Grace isn't there till after you kill him. So go into the Windmill Village, kill the Godskin Apostle, which should be pretty easy if you have a Scythe with Double Slash, for example. And then once you reload the area, Milicent will be standing here next to one of the windmills. And so we're going to ask her very nicely if she can lend us a hand. and once you have persuaded her successfully, she drops Milicent's Prosthesis. If you kill her before the Windmill Village, then she doesn't drop the Prosthesis. So you have to get her to the Windmill Village before you can kill her. And also, now that she's dead, if you go back to Gowry's shack, you can kill Gowry, and he will drop the Phlox Canvas Talisman, which will increase your incantation damage by like 8%. And that also stacks with the Faithful Canvas Talisman, if you go grab that, which does 4%. Speaking of incantation talismans, we're going to head over to the Debate Parlor in Ray of Lucaria. So this is the room where you fought the Red Wolf of Radagon. You're going to need to kill the Red Wolf of Radagon, of course. From the Debate Parlor, we're going to head out the door, and we're going to make a right at the gate. And then we're going to jump over this balcony, and we're going to climb up the ladder. Then we're going to head right, jump inside the window, make another right, and inside this chest, we're going to grab the Radagon icon. Now we're going to grab a few crystal tears. So the first one we're going to go get is the Faith Knot Crystal Tear by the Demi-Human Forest Ruins in the Weeping Peninsula. So again, follow the road south through Limgrave to get to the Weeping Peninsula, and then you can make a right on the fork of the road here. That takes you to this south of the Lookout Tower Grace, and you will see the Demi-Human Forest Ruins. Just to the north of it, so it's not in the ruins, it's like right outside of it on the north. That's where the tier is located. So that's where we're going to go. It's surrounded by a few of these Miranda Sprouts inside this basin. I already had it on the save, so that's why it's not there, but it will be inside that basin. Up next, we're going to head over to the Minor Erdtree in the Dragon Barrow, where we're going to kill the Putrid Avatar for the Opaline Hardtear. So the nearest site of grace to this is Fort Faroff. Earlier we got here by teleporting to the Bestial Sanctum from the pond just north of the Third Church of America. So just head down south and that takes you to the gigantic tree that's here. This thing hits pretty hard, so you're going to want to make sure you have a good amount of vigor, and if you go and get like Golden Vow and some decent armor or something, that helps too. But you know, it shouldn't be too hard to kill because his moveset is pretty simple. It's weak to Frostbite as you saw, so I recommend using that. It's also super weak to fire. But anyway, once you kill it, it will drop the Opaline Hardtear. While we're in the general area, we're also going to stop over by the Caelid Minor Erdtree, so this is the one on the west side of Caelid, and we're going to kill the Putrid Avatar here. If you have something like Frenzied Burst, then you can really easily cheese it from the cliffside just to the north of the Rotview Balcony, like this. So, you know, if you're having trouble with it, that's how you can kill this one, and you can also kill the other one like that too. But anyway, so once you kill this guy, he will drop the Flame Shrouding Crack Tier. You might imagine this could be pretty useful because there are, you know, dragon spells that breathe fire, so, you know, that's a good one to have. Another good item to grab that I didn't mention before, something like the Fire Scorpion Charm, and the other Scorpion Charms, depending on the incantations and stuff that you're using. These will increase your, you know, attack damage with those elements. So the fire one, for example, you can grab over at Fort Lythe, or Lyed, or wherever the hell it's supposed to be pronounced. It's all the way on the west side of Mount Gelmir. Getting to it can be a little confusing because the path is not very straightforward on the map. But anyway, so from the Erdtree Gazing Hill, head just north to the Wyndham Ruins, head west through that and you'll come to the Seathwater River, and then you can follow the river through to the Seathwater Terminus, and that takes you to Fort Lythe. And you also need to come over here for part of Alexander's quest, but I'm not showing that. So that's where you can get the Fire Scorpion Charm, and using things like that and Flame Grammy Strength and Golden Vow, you can pretty easily one-shot enemies, such as this Erdtree Avatar. Speaking of which, that was the North Liurnia Minor Erdtree, and it drops these other Shrouding Tiers that you can use to buff your different spells and incantations. One that's really useful is the Magic Shrouding Tier to buff Smaragd's Glintstone Breath, which I believe is the highest damaging Dragon Communion spell overall. Also, if you come over to the Round Table Hold, you can go into the North Wing and buy the Knight set from the Twin Maiden Husks for, I think it's about like 14,000 runes. And so that concludes the item gathering part of this guide. And so now we're going to do a showcase of what this build can do, and I'll talk about its ins and outs and ups and downs, and I'll give you some tips and pointers on how to use it effectively. So like any good build, this one relies a lot on using good buffs. So I had my Wondrous Physic that I drank, cast Golden Vow, cast Flame Grant Me Strength, and then what we're also going to do is we're going to use a debuff on the enemy. In this case, it's Dragon Ice because it procs Frostbite. So, here I am getting hit by it because the fucking Godskin Apostle has input reads and stuff. But once you proc it on him, he will take, or any enemy, takes 20% more damage from all damage types while Frostbite is active in that last 30 seconds. So that combined with the Physic plus Golden Vow plus Flame Grant Me Strength plus our Talismans and stuff means that we are doing an ungodly amount of damage, as you can see. So yeah, and choose the right tool for the job. For example, the Godskin Apostle is weak to Slash and Bleed, so I used a Slash Scythe that does a lot of bleed buildup because it's Occult and I have high Arcane, so that's a really good option to use against that particular guy. You wouldn't want to use something like a fire weapon or, like Fire Breath against him because he's resistant to fire, for example. So make sure you have a variety of tools on you and bring the right tool for the job. Here we see that one of the benefits of having access to Dragon Communion spells is that Tarnished style NPCs, such as this guy Magnus, don't know how to dodge the Dragon Breath attacks, so you can pretty easily just spam them and kill them. It really isn't effective in PvP. People think it is, but it's really not, I promise. But against NPCs, it's super strong. Here you see I'm going up against Moog. It helps that he's weak to bleed, so that's nice. But again, you want to make sure you do all your buffs before you start any major fight. And you can use your buffs going throughout, like exploration and stuff too. They're not just for boss fights. You can cast Golden Vow while you're exploring a legacy dungeon or something, So keep that in mind. Don't be afraid to use the stuff that's available to you. Especially because, you can just drink a blue flask or rest at a Site of Grace and get your FP back. There's nothing that you're losing by using your spells. But anyway, so here you saw I hit him with Dragon Ice to hit him with Frostbite to make him weaker, and now I'm hitting him with Rotten Breath to build up Scarlet Rot on him, so that'll do damage over time for the rest of the boss fight. I'm not sure if I actually procced it on him here, but, that's the intent that you want to do. You want to have those different damage sources active. So there's things like Rotten Breath. I mentioned in the build guide that there's consumables like Poison Bone Darts, so that you can do poison build-up on an enemy, and it turns out that you can, in fact, stack Rot and Poison on an enemy. Here you see I fucked up. I forgot to heal. But yeah, so you want to use the different tools that are available to you. So Dragon Ice plus Rot Breath equals the enemy's taking a lot of damage. Frostbite does not increase the damage that they take from the Scarlet Rot damage over time, but it will increase the damage that they take from getting hit with the actual Rot Breath spell that does physical damage, So it's good to do the Frostbite first, then other attacks like Rotten Breath. One of the things I don't like about the Dragon Communion spells is that they all have pretty long casting times, so you saw it in the previous clips, or in right here, I'm trying to cast the spells at him and I'm getting hit because the animation is just so long. There's definitely an element of trying to find better opportunities and punish windows to cast them, but sometimes you're gonna have to just accept that you're gonna end up getting hit. And that's fine, it's part of the game. You don't have to run it as a no-hit run, if you want to play it safe, or even if you, there's nothing wrong with using spirit summons, for example. You use a spirit ash and let the spirit distract the boss while you back off and cast your spells and stuff. But yeah, so keep that in mind, that it may benefit you to just accept that you're gonna have to trade attacks with this build, because it's gonna happen at some point no matter what. Also, here you see I'm using the Occult Hook Claws with Endure. This isn't... I think that the Bloodhound Claws will do better DPS, but I don't think we have the stats to wield them. And also, I personally just like the way the Hook Claws look better. But Claws with Occult and the Endure Ash of War, which prevents you from getting stunned out of your attacks and stuff, and it also gives you a bunch of damage negation. This gives you some pretty insane DPS. Oh, and also, you saw there, I just let the Rot finish him off. So I was like, fuck you. I used the Endure so I didn't get knocked down by it, and I thought that looked pretty cool. But yeah, Occult Claws with Endure, that is a S-tier fucking combination. Here I am going through Leyndell. I want to get a feel for what this is like when you're running around exploring instead of just fighting bosses. And, you know, there's a lot of utility in the variety of weapons that we have. So, you know, right now I'm going through this with the Morning Star. Its occult damage is really nice, and the Morning Star actually gets thrust attacks that do pierce damage. So you can see I'm doing like a crouch poke, where if you crouch and hit R1, it'll do the thrusting attack that does pierce damage. So that's nice for getting some extra range on enemies. And of course, there's the wonderful Ash of War Wild Strikes that I just used to shred that guy. Wild Strikes also gives you a bunch of hyper armor while you're doing it, and it can actually reset your poise. So I'm not going to go into full discussion of how your poise health works. I believe Illusory Wall has a really good video about it that I'll probably link down in the description. But essentially, it'll reset your poise health to like 80% of its maximum when you start using the Wild Strikes. So that can be good for, you know, like maintaining your poise. Because normally it takes like 30 seconds for your poise to regenerate. So that's a really, really solid tool to have, and also just like a needlessly strong Ash of War. Wild Strikes is so strong for no reason. Like, it's probably one of my top 3 favorite Ashes of War in the game. Maybe number 1, if I'm being honest with you. Here, I wanted to kill this page, and it wouldn't let me fucking lock onto him, because this fucking lock-on system sucks. So that's an issue. Like, oh my god, I'm looking directly at him. But yeah, so Frenzied Burst, good for sniping stuff, as you can see. Just be careful not to fall off ledges when you do it. But you know, thrusting attack and Morning Star makes this guy pretty easy to deal with. And then we're gonna go into the kill box here in a second. I messed it up a bit in this clip because I wanted to take advantage of the fact that the Dragon Breath will, you know, go a pretty good distance and can go through enemies, you know, because there's the high page and there's the perfumer there on the right, and they are the reason why this room is so fucking deadly. That, especially that high page with this crossbow and the 3-shot perfumer's bolts is just nuts. But what I should have done is I should have free-aimed the Rot Breath here, and then I could have gone up and slightly to the right from the page, and I would have hit both him and the perfumer behind him. So, you know, it's a good skill to be able to play unlocked and free aim your spells and your attacks and stuff, because I could have gotten more benefit out of the spell if I had done that there. Here I decided to switch it up to Rivers of Blood. As you can see, when you use it correctly, it seriously gets like some of the highest possible DPS in the game. I'm not sure where exactly it is in the rankings, but it's definitely up there. It does some pretty nuts fucking damage. The thing about it is that you have to use it the right way. A lot of people like misinterpret how it's supposed to be used, and they do it wrong, and that severely hurts their damage. Oh, and here, this tree is weak to fire, so I'm using Blood Flame Talons. It can't bleed, but it is super weak to fire, and Blood Flame does a lot of fire damage, so I am destroying this tree. But anyway, the thing about Rivers of Blood is when you use the Ash of War, you need to hit with both the sword and the blood things that come out of it, right? A lot of people, you know, will look at it and be like, oh, Rivers of Blood has a bunch of range because this blood slash comes out of it with every attack that you do. But the blood slashes on their own suck. Most of the damage is still coming from hitting the enemy with the actual physical sword. So if you do it at point blank range, you get so much damage like you just saw there. You know, enough that you can single combo like knights and shit on New Game Plus 2, you know. So you really do want to make sure that you're using this thing at melee range, like you would with any other weapon that's using something like double slash, you know. So here, I came up against this gargoyle, and I decided to switch up my talisman so I can maximize my damage against it, because again, you want to make sure that you have the right tool for the job. You don't have to switch in the middle of combat or whatever, you know. You can look at an upcoming boss fight and say, okay, you know, this talisman, this buff, this weapon will be better for this boss than what I'm already using or whatever. And you can switch your stuff up as needed. So I decided to switch Shard of Alexander over to the Phlox Canvas talisman so that I can get the extra incantation damage, because I didn't bother using Ash of War, so I had no use for Shard of Alexander. But with all my buffs and shit, I 4-shotted this gargoyle, you know. I think that's pretty good. And you see, when I'm casting Dragon Claw, I use 2 seals to do it, and I alternate right, left, right, left. Dragon Claw lets you do like 2 hits in a row with the same hand, so you can do right, and then you can do a follow-up right. But it's actually a lot faster and more effective if you have 2 seals and you go right, left, because you can do it a lot faster, and it's just better. Here you see I'm using Rivers of Blood against an enemy that is immune to bleed, and I'm still doing some pretty damn good damage. If I had used something like Seppuku to, proc the Lord of Blood's Exultation before the fight, then I would be doing a lot more damage. But I just want to show this kind of as like proof that when you're using a decently upgraded weapon, most of your damage isn't coming from doing the bleeds. I believe someone on the Elden Ring Discord did some math or something, and they're like, yeah, when you're using something like, Bloodhound Claws or Rivers of Blood or whatever, the damage that happens because of the bleed procs constitutes about 5% of your total DPS, so the bleeds are nice to have, but the main reason why you're using them is for the purpose of proccing your Lord of Blood's Exultation and your White Mask so that your physical attacks are doing more damage. And also you can use them to, proc those buffs and then use your spells or whatever too. You don't have to use a melee weapon with the Lord of Blood's Exultation. So here I'm fighting Morgott, and like Moog, I decided to open up with the Dragon Ice because I want to hit him with the Frostbite. I think I'm out of range on this first cast, so you have to make sure that you're actually in range. I should have just walked like 10 feet closer to him and I would have hit him. But yeah, so you always want to open up with Dragon Ice if the enemy is vulnerable to Frostbite, so that you can get that extra damage buff for the next 30 seconds of the fight. So I got him down to phase 2. And you saw there, when I rolled away from him, the Briar Armor hit him, and that's what actually set him into phase 2, which I think is interesting. But anyway, so while he was doing his phase 2 transition, I was like, ooh, that's a good opportunity to hit Rot Breath. And so I hit him with Rot Breath, and now he is Scarlet Rotted. And that's good because I suck at fighting Morgott, as you might be able to tell. So it's good to have that damage over time happening. And as you see, I get my ass kicked by him a little bit here. And I nearly died, but I didn't die because I had 40 Vigor, so I'll always have at least 40 Vigor. And then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. The Scarlet Rot's going to kill him, so I'm done fighting him. And so I let the Scarlet Rot kill him, It lasts for 90 seconds, and it does a whole bunch of damage. So, take advantage of that. Here you see something pretty cool. Because the Dragon Claw makes you float up into the air, his stomp didn't hit me when he did his ground stomp because it was too low. So if you're skillful and you know your boss fights in and out, then you can definitely take advantage of things like that. If you go watch like an Ongball video, he's got plenty of times where he does stuff like that when he's fighting like Radagon or whatever. But yeah, so that's a cool thing to keep in mind if you want some style points. I did it completely by accident there, but it is a cool flippin' thing to do. Here you see I'm using dual Scavenger's Curve swords. So a lot of people will be like, oh, I want to put the Blood Affinity and Seppuku on my Curve Sword so they're doing as much bleed as possible. But like I said earlier, the blood loss, it really isn't the main part of your damage. It's a very minor part of your damage. The main damage that you're doing is with the physical hits of actually hitting the bad guy. So what I use is Cragblade and the Occult Affinity. So the Occult Affinity gives it more physical damage, and then Cragblade buffs the physical damage the weapon does, and also buffs the poise damage the weapon does. So you see I'm already getting some pretty nutso damage numbers, and what makes it better is all the buffs that I'm getting from my Talismans, because we've got Milicent's Prosthesis giving me the multi-hit consecutive hit buff, where if you land more hits in a short period of time, you get an increasing damage buff. So there's Milicent's Prosthesis, there's the Winged Sword Insignia, or Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, and there's the Thorny Cracktear, all of which contribute toward that. And then I also have Ritual Sword Talisman on, which would be buffing my damage if I was at full health. And there's also Lord of Blood's Exultation, which, you know, if I proc a bleed, then for 20 seconds, I get like a 20% damage boost. And then there's also the white mask, which stacks with Lords of Blood Exultation and gives another like 10 or 15% damage boost. And so in total, you know, having dual occult, Cragblade, Scavenger's Curve swords can just do an ungodly amount of damage. You know, so a lot of people will do like the dual curve swords bleed thing, but most people actually do it wrong. If you do it occult Cragblade with multi-hit buff talismans, you are gonna shred shit. Here you see I'm fighting a Blackblade Kindred, and I decided to show off Rotten Breath. So you'd think Rotten Breath isn't great against this guy because he's immune to Scarlet Rot, but the thing about it is that gargoyles are relatively weak to standard damage, so, you know, that's one of the 4 physical damage types, standard, which is what Rotten Breath does. So they're relatively weak to that, and I have a bunch of buffs, such as Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, which increase my damage by a whole bunch. And so you saw with that opening Rot Breath, I did like half of his health just by casting a single spell. You know, so I go on to get owned a bit here, but again, like I said earlier, like all the way back at the beginning of the guide, having 40 Vigor allows you to survive a lot of shit. I'm in New Game +2 fighting a Blackblade Kindred, and, you know, not getting murked despite trading hits with it, because I have some damage negation from the Opaline Hardtear, and I've got 40 Vigor giving me a good amount of health. And it would be even better if I had 60 Vigor, you know? And to close it out, I decided to go up against the Fire Giant. As you can see, he does not like Dragon Ice. He has a bunch of Frostbite resistance, but this thing hits so many times that it's still pretty easy to proc the Frostbite on him with, which you're about to see me do here once I get up to him again. And then after that, I'm going to switch over to the Reduvia for its obscene DPS that it gets because of the bleeds that it procs. Plus all the, you know, buffs and stuff that I have going on. So again, there's Lord of Blood's Exultation, there's the multi-hit buff talismans and stuff that I've got going on, I've got Golden Vow, I've got Flame Grant Me Strength. All of those things are adding up towards his damage, plus the Fire Giant is frostbitten and thus taking more damage. And so yeah, you know, I shredded him in Phase 1. And then here you see at the opening of Phase 2, I hit him with Dragon Ice again, because he actually resets when he goes into Phase 2. He, you know, if he's frostbitten, then the frostbite goes away. If he's, you know, Scarlet Rotted, then the Scarlet Rot goes away. So I went to try to proc frostbite again on him, but he just has a lot of frostbite resistance, especially because I'm in New Game +2. So I don't believe I procced it on him. But as you're going to see, it's not going to be quite a big deal because the Reduvia just does a whole lot of damage. I'm not even using the Blood Blades right now. Oh, and another thing with the Reduvia Blood Blade, it's like Rivers of Blood, where the most effective way to use it isn't as a projectile at distance, it's to use it as a melee weapon. So you get right up close to the bad guy and you hit them with the L2s so that both the projectile and the dagger itself are hitting. And that'll maximize the damage and the bleed buildup that you do. So I totally didn't die to the Fire Giant. I really did quit out to him there. But I decided that I wanted to go and reallocate my flasks so that I could have more mana for casting spells and stuff. Like I said, that's one of the drawbacks of using the Dragon Communing spells, is that they're so FP intensive, but they also do so much damage that it makes up for it. And so we only have 20 mind, but you can just take an extra blue flask or two, and that completely makes up for it, you know. I personally don't think it's worth putting points into mind that could instead go into vigor or your damage stat, you know, when 20 mind is almost always more than enough for, like, pretty much every application. But yeah, so I recommend going 8 red flasks, 6 blue flasks. As you saw, I reallocated 2, and that just gives me enough more FP that I can do some more Reduvia blood blading once we get to the second phase of the fight. Something I want to point out is that this is a Dragon Communion Seal build, but that doesn't mean you have to exclusively use incantations and stuff. You can use your weapons and stuff too, and in a lot of applications, your weapons can be better than your spells. For example, the Reduvia just does so much DPS with the bleeds that, I'm using it against them over Dragonclaw or something. Admittedly, there's probably a pretty good chance that Dragonclaw would do better damage to him. In fact, I'm pretty confident that it probably would, though I could be wrong. But I'm going to stake my bets and say that Dragonclaw would probably do more damage. But, Reduvia is cool, and I want to use it. We have all this Arcane, so, why not? Switch up your tactics and stuff as needed and try different things out and see what works for you, But anyway, that concludes this video. I don't currently have any closing notes to say, so you can check the description for the additional notes section. I usually update it within a day of actually uploading the video. But yeah, if you have any questions or feedback, please leave a comment down below. Don't forget to leave a like, share the video, and subscribe if you want to see more Diabeator content. My name is Diabeator, and I will catch you later.